Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to the channel. Makita's been making tools for a long time and circular saws are no exception. So they have a lot of circular saws in their lineup, but today we're going to be taking a look at this Makita 36V 7¼ top handle brushless circular saw. So stick with us. All right, you guys, so this right here is the Makita brushless 7¼ circular saw, top handle style, but model number is XSH06, okay? So when you buy it, it comes with this dust port. It doesn't come attached, you just have to install it. It's a single Phillips head screw, no real problems, okay? So this one right here is a 36V saw, meaning it takes two of their 18V LXT batteries, and when you plug them in, it wires it up in series and it works as a 36V tool, okay? So if you wire two of the batteries in series, two 5Ah batteries in series, it just becomes a single 36V 5Ah battery, okay? The amperages or whatnot do not add up, okay? So let's just say, for instance, if you added a 2Ah battery and a 5Ah battery, your weakest link is gonna be the 2Ah battery. So it's not gonna work after the 2Ah battery gets depleted, okay? So if you are gonna use the system like this, I would try to make sure you can use two of the same batteries, preferably at the same fuel level or same voltage or same charge, whatever you wanna call it. So make sure you do keep that in mind, okay? So let's go take a closer look at this saw, but before we do that, let's get into some of the marketing hype. So this one right here, like I said, uses two LXT batteries. It's a Makita built brushless motor, meaning it doesn't need brushes. It does have automatic speed change technology, which adjusts cutting speed and torque for optimum cut performance, okay? It does have electronic brake and it can bevel up to 56 degrees. It has positive stops at 22.5, 45, and 56 degrees. The base is a die-cast magnesium base. Blade guard and blade cover, everything is pretty much standard lightweight, and it uses two LXT batteries, and when you add those batteries in, the saw will weigh in at 10.5 pounds. That is with the batteries, okay? So the blade diameter, obviously 7¼ arbor size 5/8, max cutting capacity at 90 degrees, 2 5/8 of an inch, but when you bevel it to 45 degrees, it will drop to 1 13/16 of an inch. If you bevel at 50 degrees, it becomes 1 5/16 of an inch, okay? The no load speed of the motor comes in at 6,000 RPMs, and the overall length is roughly around 13.5 inches. And like we said, it is a top handle style saw, okay? So this saw right here is not exactly new. We've had it for a bit. We've used it a little bit. As you can see, it's a little used, but it's not heavily used. We generally prefer the rear handle saws, but we do have this one, did use it a couple bit. But let's bring you in closer and then let's take a closer look at it. All right, you guys, so here's the saw pretty much close up. Like I said, die-cast magnesium base. Here's the blade guard right here. This is a piece of plastic that you add on. Nothing too fancy going on here. Pretty much standard stuff you see in most Makita saws, okay? So if you look at the front, this is the part where I think Makita does really well, a lot better than most other circular saw manufacturers out there or whatnot, is that one, this bevel adjustment is not, it's not two knobs like you see. You got a knob here, whatnot. It's a single lever design. You pull one lever up and you can tilt or bevel the saw relatively easily, okay? So on that front, they also have positive stops built in right here with this knob, right? So this knob is right here. So right now it is set to 22.5 degrees, right? So if I flip this bevel button and I look right here, bam, positive stop there. Cannot go any further, okay? So not sure how well that's gonna show up there. Hopefully it shows up pretty well, but watch this again. Bevel automatically 22.5, okay? If I do switch it right over here to 45 degrees, right? 45 degree bevel, no issue. Okay, you don't have to guess, okay? And there is another stop right here for 56 degrees for when you do have to make that 56 degree bevel, right? It'll bevel all the way up, 56 degrees. And that's actually really convenient because a lot of times when you do make cuts, sometimes you're looking at it right here thinking, okay, let me guess here. I think that's, I don't know, some degrees here, 22.5 or whatnot. But everyone knows if you're not looking at it dead straight on, you could actually be a little bit off. And if you're trying to get like really tight miters or Obviously, this is not a miter saw, but if you're trying to get really clean cuts or tight cuts and tight tolerances, that's a struggle, okay? But you know, if you just flip this, right, to the bevel that you want, you know, it's pretty much going to be set that way. So that actually is really nice. And this is not like some random cheap selector button, right? So you can actually hear it click, right? Watch. Not sure if it's going to come out on the microphone or on the YouTube or whatnot, but it is a really nice. It's not something cheap. So they did think that out pretty well, and that does work really, really well. Okay. So on the front here, it also has like a rip guide if you want to stick like a rip guide in here, and you can tighten it down right here. No real issues. The spindle lock for when you need to change the blade or whatnot is right here. It's this lever. You just press this lever in. Changing the blade on here is pretty simple. Same thing you do with with the same thing it would be with most Makita saws, okay? So let's go around on the back here. So on the back side right here, it's got the blade hex Allen key or whatever you want to call it, which is one thing I do wish that they did a little bit differently. Like for instance, this is just literally like an Allen wrench or an Allen key, right? So as you can see here, it's just a bolt, right? So it is like a hex shape. So I do wish they included a wrench on it instead of just an Allen key, because you know you can obviously gain more torque and more, I don't know, it's easier just to use a wrench than the Allen key, but that is just one thing. They do include an Allen key on the rear handle saw. I don't know why they decided to go with just the Allen key on this one. So hopefully that could be something that they will improve, but I mean, no one's gonna gripe or cry over it. So while we're looking at the front here, you can see that it does have a like rubberized blade guard stopping item thing there. So if it does stop, even if it stops hard, it doesn't really go click, click, click. You don't hear metal on metal. It's metal on rubber. So this saw has been really, I mean, they thought a lot of things through this saw, okay? It's got a front handle here. If you do use two hands to cut it or whatnot. On the back side, there's nothing too much interesting going on. Obviously you have this, and this is where your two batteries go, right? So not too interesting there. On the back side, you have your depth adjustment, and it is a single lever design, as you would see on most saws these days. And it works generally pretty well. The line markings are, it's a white scale, but you see black lettering on there, right? So it's pretty simple to see. Doesn't have too many issues, okay? The other thing I did want to note on here is, if this saw looks familiar, it's mainly because they do make this exact saw just with a different base, okay? So this exact saw can be had with a track compatible base, and the model number on that one is XSH08. Okay, and the saw itself is the same, except for the base on the XSH08 does fit on the Makita track, and you can use it kind of like a track saw, okay? You don't get all the benefits of a track saw, but it does work on the track. So if it does look familiar, it's because they also have the same type of saw just on the XGT platform that we haven't reviewed, or we will review sometime in the near future, depending on when this video goes up. But it's a pretty tried and true design. I mean, they've been making these saws for a long time, and they're probably not going to change too much of what exactly has been working well for them, okay? On the front here, going back to the front, you kind of see like the line markings and stuff. You kind of see like it's a standard, like a light gray paint job on the base, and the line markings and everything are pretty much on zero, or in black. I'm not sure how many of you guys actually look at this versus looking at the blade when you're cutting. Some people look really hard at like the line of sight on here versus just looking at the blade. Depending on how you cut or what you're cutting, that may be something that you are maybe looking at. So that's all there really is with this. On the saw here, you can really, the safety mechanism or whatnot, it does work both ways. So if you're right-handed, obviously it works pretty easily. If you are left-handed, it also works pretty easily, okay? But if you're left-handed, you're gonna be mainly looking at it like this, right? So you can kind of see the blade. If you're right-handed, you're kind of working at it like this, right? So you kind of have to look over like that. So if you're right-handed, you kind of have to look this way, and I think maybe, who knows, that's why I kind of prefer the rear handle saws or whatnot. But anyways, we're not here to talk about that. So that's pretty much what you get with the saw. So now let's get to the part where everybody really wants to know, right? The performance. So in order to do that, we're going to put it through our test. Just give you a quick recap on what our test really is, pretty much on all these circular saws. It's going to be and we get a brand new 24 carbide teeth Avanti Pro framing blade, 7¼ inch, installed fresh. We use fully charged 5 amp hour batteries, 2 fully charged 5 amp hour batteries on this saw, and we will rip on the 4-foot side, double stacked, 23-30 seconds, LP top notch 350 subflooring 3 times, and we take the average of that number to get the performance, okay? So that's pretty much what it's gonna be for all the circular saws. We will release an updated video on the GSH01 cutting subflooring, mainly because we released those numbers with 2x whatever framing material, okay? So we will go ahead and revisit that. So without further ado, let's get to it. All right, you guys, so that was very interesting, mainly because there was a lot more sawdust than we had expected, okay? So we had the dust collection system hooked up, and so I thought there would probably be minimal dust, but actually, I'm not sure how well it's gonna come out on camera or video or whatnot, but there was a lot of sawdust flying pretty much everywhere. I almost had to check to see, hey, make sure we turn the dust collection system on. And we did, and it does work. And I tried it once without the dust collection system hooked up to it, and it was mostly spewing out the back. So even with the dust collection system hooked up, there does seem to be a lot of dust everywhere, so make sure you do keep that in mind. If you do run it with this, I'm sure maybe if you ran it with a fine finish blade and cut a little bit slower, it would probably be more manageable. But for the performance test, we just tried to push it through roughly as quick as we can where it's comfortable for the saw, okay? A lot of that also has to do with feel and hearing and things like that. So what happened? So we ran it 3 times and it came up first run 6 seconds, second run 6 seconds, and then third run we pushed it as hard as we could possibly, and it came up about 5 seconds. So you could probably push it all 5s if you run it all 5s, but I mean, most people on the job site aren't going to be pushing that saw as hard as they possibly can to make the cut, right? So I think if you do it comfortably and relative with the speed in mind, you could probably get like all solid 6s, right? So anyways, with that being said, if you average the 3 runs, it comes in at about 5.67-ish, okay? So right now, that one will have to be the one on the leaderboard because that's the only one on the leaderboard. What we will do is update the second saw that we have to run on this current test setup, and then we will run with it, okay? So what can we really say about this saw, okay? So this saw felt awfully familiar with this saw, the XGT GSH02, okay? So these 2 saws are pretty much the same, I would say, if you look at it or think about it or even if you run with it, right? They're pretty much the same. Both of them have about 6,000 RPMs. They're both pretty much a 36-volt platform. The XGT says it's 40-volt max, right? But it's really 36-volt system. But on this saw, the XSH06 with 2 5 amp hour batteries, it's a 36-volt platform and a 5 amp hour battery setup. If you run it with this XGT setup, it's a 36-volt system with a 4 amp hour setup, right? So technically, the GSH06 should, in theory, be able to drive more torque or more feel, more powerful or whatnot, but you got to run with 2 batteries. I don't really mind that because if you're in a platform, I guarantee you'll probably have more than 1 battery, okay? You do not see people running around in power tool platforms with only 1 battery on hand, okay? So that's just something to keep in mind. So anyways, we have another video about the XGT02, so make sure you go check that out. We're gonna post a video about running the new numbers in a different video shortly. So it does feel very familiar with this, and I would say if you blindfolded yourself and kind of use the saw, which is stupid because you don't want to be cutting blindfolded, you probably would not be able to tell the difference between the 2, okay? Unless you've used the XGT so much you just have like a one-hand feel for it, then fine, but I mean, other than that, no issue, Okay, so what else can we really say? I mean, it's a great saw, right? It's pretty heavy, right? If you think about how heavy saws can be, because you're running two 5 amp-hour batteries, right? But I don't really mind. That's just a personal preference. Of course, I don't want to be cutting overhead with it all the time. But generally, I like to use a rear-handed worm drive style saw, if not a worm drive saw, exceptionally. So that's why this saw doesn't necessarily get too much use. We kind of use it mainly around, because I kind of leave it mainly in the shop and use it for things like that. But it doesn't necessarily get taken out too much. But it does feel refreshing because it feels very, very powerful, okay? And I mean, there's not too much really to say. It does everything really well. There's a few improvements, like I said. Having a blade wrench instead of like an Allen key here would obviously be a little nice. If you're trying to get really precise cuts, I would really like this, the bevel indicator to be a little bit more precise. Right now it's so far offset, like the indicator is so far off from the scale itself. You have to be making sure you're looking at it direct if you're not going to get a positive stop cut, right? Because positive stops are at 22.5, 45, and like 56, right? But if I wanted, let's just say, whatever reason, 10-degree cut, right? Trying to get it exactly at 10 degrees is going to be a little bit difficult. But, you know, we're just like nitpicking. Anyways, it's a great saw. I mean, you can't really go wrong with the saw. If you want the same saw, but you want it on the track, just get the XSH08 model, right? And it's the same saw. I would definitely get that. I didn't know, or maybe they didn't have that one when we originally bought this a few years ago. So I would have gotten that one instead. So if you are looking at one of the saws, I would definitely look at either the XSH08 model in the LXT lineup or the GSH02 model in the XGT lineup. Okay, those would be the two saws I really get if you're trying to go for a sidewinder type saw, mainly because you can use it on the track. Okay, so it's a good saw. I mean, you can't really complain too much about it, right? It works well. It's really smooth, really refined. You can really tell that this is a saw or a company that's been manufacturing these devices for a while, right? Every once in a while you may pick up like a lesser brand saw or lesser known saw or fresh to the market saw or whatnot, and you kind of feel like it's a little rough, right? This one actually feels a lot more refined. So in that manner, it's pretty good, so, right? So what else can we say? I mean, like I said, you can't really go wrong, but hope this video helped you guys out. Stay tuned for more episodes while we check out more circular saws that run it through the track. So stay tuned.